Hi, my name is Mark Birch, Global Startup Advocate at AWS. Introduce yourself, please.
Hey, I'm Shahar Azulay, co-founder and CEO of Grindr.
So really glad to have you here today to share a little bit about your story and what GroundCover is doing. But I always like to get a sense of how did you get there in the first place? Like before the startup, what were you doing?
Looking down my career path, I think I've been doing a lot of things that led up to GroundCover in a sense over the years. I started with about a decade in cybersecurity, like most people in Tel Aviv in a sense, working for different solutions around cybersecurity, offensive and defensive. Later on, a lot of years in startups, small startups, dealing with machine learning and AI mostly in the last 8 to 10 years before GroundCover. I was the head of research at a small startup that grew into a much bigger place around health recommendations and things like that. And later on, a team leader at Apple around more practical machine learning in the watch and stuff like that. So any complaints you can direct it to me. But mostly basically responsible for teams building application, deployment to production, and caring about them running okay in production and sometimes wake at night. So I guess that's the engineering journey that every engineering manager or leader has went through to kind of figure out what is monitoring, what is observability, why do you care so much about it, and where it really hurts. So that was for me the journey to GroundCover.
And so in that leap from what you were doing previously, because obviously you have a lot of years of experience in machine learning and cybersecurity, how did you come upon the problem to solve that GroundCover is trying to solve?
I think basically it kind of originates from personal pain points of me and Chesed, our CPO, for many years that things start to repeat in a sense from company to company, from role to role, from different application you're dealing with.
So you've seen that pattern over and over.
See a pattern of one really hard work around observability. It's always a concern of it's kind of building the foundation of the R&D in a sense. It's part of your CI cycle. It's part of the way you train your developers to think. They do tests as good as they do observability in a sense, because it will later on impact everything down the line of the development cycle. So it takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of experience to do it right. And you see experienced R&D leaders building the observability stack much better than newcomers that are not sure yet what to do, and remind themselves too late about that. And the others is a lot of trade-offs that engineering teams have to kind of go through, which I think are unfair. In a sense, I've been through this cycle like at least 10 times of working hard, getting observability in like logs, metric, traces, and then telling my guys that it costs so much. We have to reduce this metric cardinality. We have to sample more traces. We have to reduce that log level, and we can't handle it. You guys are pushing too much information into my observability vendor, and I'm paying too much. And that's a really weird trade-off to be in. So these two pain points are kind of where GroundCover says it's enough. The architecture and the way these things are built is completely broken for the modern architecture for microservices. Tons of API-dependent application talking to another, high-volume scaled systems. It just doesn't work anymore. So these are pain points that I've seen happen in multiple times.
Yeah, and I've definitely seen that myself in multiple instances of startups and large companies, particularly, have that pain point trying to monitor so much and having to make those trade-offs. But maybe just share with the folks listening, like, how does a customer experience GroundCover? Like, what would they do day to day that would be affected?
So I think GroundCover, first of all, kind of creates a different experience into what an APM or application performance monitoring tool, which is kind of the highest level of observability, what it should experience, what the experience should be like, in a sense of, instead of, as I said, pre-planning all that cycle of development and integrating, an SDK from the observability vendor really deeply into your code and maintaining it for every service and stuff like that, suddenly it's a completely out-of-bed experience, which we used to in different domains. You just throw on an agent, running in the cluster, right? Post-production, post your applications are running, hybrid multiple language environment, of the data science team writing in whatever and, the backend team writing in whatever. And suddenly everything works in a unified fashion. So it's a bit different experience from a time to value perspective. They would just install one command line and suddenly all production would be monitored in the same way, in a very, very deep way. And they would also not work so hard to coordinate inside the organization around, guys, next sprint, we're integrating observability X. One guy in the organization can suddenly install a huge production and go back to the dev team and say, guys, everybody's monitored now. These are your dashboards. Let's start making this count. And so I think it's a completely different experience. It's a very self-served, immediate, frictionless experience at what deep observability should be like.
That's super helpful. I think it's obviously adding a ton of value and reducing this like we call it at AWS, undifferentiated heavy workday. Mm-hmm. You're doing that in application performance monitoring space to making it so much easier. So you're at a point now, you have customers, traction. What does the future hold? Like, what are kind of the next stages? Is it more product development, customer segments? It could be maybe different markets, maybe even fundraising. Like, what holds?
I think basically Barcover has already passed the point of, together with the community, of raising awareness that eBPF, the technology we're using, is the future of observability. We're seeing it all across the board, and definitely the way Barcover is moving, or the vector we're moving on, is clearly the future in that sense. The point we have to prove this year for us, and kind of the next stage in our journey, is to dominate the Kubernetes API segment, because for us, what Barcover brings to the table, this amazing time to value, this unified experience, and the very cloud native experience. I mean, we're all born after Kubernetes were born, unlike the other solutions in the market. So we're really fit into this world. There's definitely a big gap there. So for us, if you're a Kubernetes user, if the first thing you do is think about Barcover as a solution to your observability stack, that for us is the next stage we need to prove. And we're definitely well-funded to get there. Next, it will be, of course, growing further and expanding the company. But I think we're very equipped to get to that stage, and that is the next proof point for us.
Yeah, and that's absolutely critical. Like being part of that Kubernetes community, and that, as you're saying, that's just part and parcel of, you're deploying on Kubernetes. This is how you monitor. Exactly. So it's super exciting to hear that. You've had multiple different types of roles. What have you found in your experience being a founder that you've learned about being part of startups and helping startups to succeed, and maybe some lesson learned along the way that might be helpful for folks listening?
I think we've been running for a year and a half, so I guess there's much more educated people than me, but what I've learned so far is that, in these types of solutions, definitely the product is what eventually is the driver of the company. And we're trying to be as modest and as humble as we can around that, to really hear the users. It's a healthy environment, and, they have so much solutions. Hear them out, hear what actually solves the problem, creating a product that people really love. And, product for developers, that is a tough nut to crack. So we're definitely working heavily on that, letting the customer voice lead the solution and not the other way around, and finding a way to create what we all hoped will be a PLG funnel of, awareness and bottom-up exposure in the actual sales funnel of Barcover. So I think as a CEO, my lesson learned is that if the product really works for people, everything else kind of aligns. We might not be the best at a sales-driven motion at the moment, or we could do better marketing, but we're starting to feel that traction from the product pulling us in the right direction. And I think that's the compass company like ours should take. So that's for me the basic thing we follow daily.
Absolutely, especially when you're talking about developer experience and elevating that experience. It's so important that the product and the experience we build around that is really crisp and put together, creating a lot of value in a short amount of time. And I look at product-led growth, community-led growth as really key levers in this entire industry. It's been super to have you share a little bit about your insights, what you're building, your background. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. Take care now.